Bonjour et bienvenue.
Hello and
Je
welcome.
m'appelle Dr. Ramesh
My name
Zacharias.
is Dr.
Je suis
Ramesh
le
Zacharias,
PDG
and
et
I am
directeur
the
médical
CEO
au
and
Centre
Medical
d'Excellence sur
Director
la douleur
of the
chronique
Chronic Pain
pour les
Center of
vétérans
Excellence
canadiens.
for Canadian
Aux
veterans.
anciens combattants présents aujourd'hui,
And to the
merci
veterans
pour
that are
votre
here with us
service.
today, I would like to say thank you
The
for your
title of this
service.
webinar is Resilience in the Face of Trauma. The CPCOE is excited to host this webinar today, exploring how service in the Canadian Armed Forces and RCMP uniquely affects veterans, focusing on the needs for resilience when serving members experience traumatic events. Attendees will gain a deeper understanding of the resources available to support veterans through the transition process, featuring expert speakers, personal stories, and interactive discussions. I would like to thank our two speakers today. Our first speaker is RCMP Sergeant Retired Lori White. Our second speaker is Dr. Alfred Amalados. I have the privilege of working with Dr. Amalados, who sees most of the veterans who are admitted to our interdisciplinary pain program at the Michael G. DeGroote Pain Clinic located at Hamilton Health Sciences. I would also like to thank our moderator for this webinar, Lieutenant General Retired Jean-Marc Lantier. Jean-Marc joined the Canadian Armed Forces in 1989 as an armored officer after graduating from the University of Ottawa. In senior roles, Lieutenant General Lantier was Chief of Program at National Defence Headquarters and Commander of the Canadian Army, later becoming Vice Chief of Defence Staff until his retirement in 2020. Jean-Marc.
Merci beaucoup, Dr. Zacharias. On behalf of the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence for Canadian Veterans, welcome to our spring, almost summer 2025 webinar. It's my pleasure today to be your moderator for this session, and it will be divided in two parts. After my introductory remarks, we will hear first from Lori White, who will share her lived experience as an RCMP member, and we'll hear her story of resilience. We'll then have the pleasure of hearing from Dr. Alfred Amalados, who will look at both resilience and trauma from the perspective of a psychiatrist. There's two streams to choose from. There's a French language and an English language stream, and we are providing simultaneous translation. All the support material has been translated. The presentations and slides are best viewed in a full screen mode. So let me start by introducing Lori. In 1998, while stationed in Kitimat, BC with the RCMP, Lori was shot in the right leg by an alleged sex offender wielding a sawed-off .303 rifle. The damage was so severe that her right leg had to be amputated 5 inches below the knee. After only 10 months of rehabilitation, Lori passed the RCMP Physical Ability Requirement Evaluation Test and made an unprecedented return to full, unrestricted general policing duties with a prosthetic leg. When she retired from the RCMP in 2020, she achieved a 22-year goal of publishing a memoir. 1033, An Officer Down Steps Back Up. In 2024, Lori was diagnosed with melanoma and now partners with Melanoma Canada, promoting awareness and early detection of skin cancer. Lori has received several awards, including the Governor General's Meritorious Service Medal, the Medal of Valor from the International Association of Women Police, and the Queen's Diamond Jubilee Medal. Lori has been a sought-after speaker since 1999. Today, she candidly shares her experience as a first responder navigating mental health issues and life with a permanent physical disability. While Lori's journeys began as one of trauma, loss, and grief, it evolved into one of hope, resilience, and post-traumatic growth.
Good morning. My name is Lori, and my goal today is simple but deeply important. It's to remind you of your impact and to inspire you to see opportunity even in the darkest corners of adversity. I believe that storytelling is one of the most powerful forms of human connection. So thank you for the honor of allowing me to share some of mine. But while I speak, I invite you to reflect. I want you to reflect on your own story and your own impact because it's there, even if you don't always feel it. 26 years ago, I was 28 years old, and in an instant, my life was shattered. One gunshot, one bullet, one moment that changed everything. I sustained a traumatic injury that left me with a permanent physical disability and life altering post traumatic stress disorder. I lost so much that day: my leg, my sense of identity, my confidence, and at times my will to live. But over the years, thankfully, I've also gained perspective, strength, and clarity, and some of the most profound lessons of my life have been learned. Policing wasn't a lifelong dream for me. I was from Brockville, Ontario. I got 2 degrees. I had no direction though after I graduated, and I was living with my parents, juggling 4 jobs and collecting lots and lots of PFO letters, as I like to call them, my please F off letters. I just wasn't enough this. I needed more of something else. And I was in a very low place in my life. I ended up meeting an RCMP officer in my hometown, and in Brockville, RCMP officers did federal work only. And so I saw them in a different light. And when he suggested that I apply, that I was fit and outgoing and policing might be a good career option, I jumped at the idea. I hadn't ever considered policing before, but I was craving a challenge. When I went to depot, it was a shock. I ironed my sheets. I learned marching and drill, and it was very, very intense. Gave me structure though, and it gave me a sense of camaraderie and a sense of purpose, something that I was really longing for. And on graduation day, I was wearing my red serge and I felt an unparalleled sense of pride. It was such a solid feeling, like I'd found where I belonged, and I was so excited to begin this next chapter of my life. My first posting, Kitimat. Yep, I had to look it up too. I ended up going to Kitimat and developing a bit of a niche in sex crimes investigations. And on a brisk November afternoon in 1998, we attended the home of an alleged sex offender. I was standing outside with 2 of my partners. I was under the carport with one, and the third member was around the back. And suddenly it was a pop. It was a gunshot, and my ears rang. I could smell the gunpowder. I tasted the chalky residue. I looked down and I saw this smoke billowing from my leg, and I saw a hole in the door. And I felt the pain and realized I'd been shot. And it was so strange how all my senses had kicked in before my brain actually learned or realized that that's exactly what had happened. Lie down, my partner said, and I heard on the radio code, or on the radio, I heard the radio code that no officer ever wants to hear, and it's 1033. 1033 means officer down, and I was that officer. I remember sirens, I remember the flashing lights, and I remember getting picked up by 2 of the paramedics, and my leg was dangling. It was a weird, weird feeling, and I was rushed down to the hospital in Kitimat, and arrangements were being made for me to go to Vancouver. I knew things were serious then, and I underwent an 8-hour surgery where they tried to restore circulation to my foot. Unfortunately, they were unable to. I had been shot with a sawed-off 303 rifle in the middle of my shin on my right side, and the damage was so severe that my leg had to be amputated. Like, amputated was just a word I was completely unfamiliar with. I couldn't look. I didn't want to, because I felt like looking would make it real, and if I could just distract myself and be in denial, it would be easier coping with this new situation that I was facing. The pain and the physical and the emotional pain, it was just all so unbearable in that time. I felt shattered. I was angry. I was being told that I should be grateful to be alive. I didn't feel like that. I felt very lost, and I felt very broken, and I felt like I wasn't able to continue with my life, because so I isolated, I self-medicated, I shut down, and I contemplated seriously suicide. But then something shifted in me when I went to my rehab facility. I met people with devastating injuries, burns, stroke victims, spinal cord damage, brain injuries. And it was a very humbling time in my life, because I felt so strange that I had lost too. But I found myself thinking, oh, well, that person is so much worse off than me, and that person has it sort of slightly better than me. And I realized that there was no point in assigning myself a place on a continuum of who's got it the worst and who's got it the least bad, because there are no wins when people are suffering. Adversity isn't a competition, and it's certainly not discerning. We each carry weights, some visible, some not, and the only thing that we truly control is our response. So I chose to bet on myself. Rehab was a grind. It was a daily, daily grind, and I thrived on routine. I still do. I lived with chronic pain. also still have that. But at physio, I began to set micro goals. I started to learn that setting big, lofty goals was too daunting. So I set small ones. I had to learn how to balance. I had to learn range of motion. I had to learn to walk, and then I wanted to walk without a limp. I wanted to run, even though I loathe running. I wanted to skate. I wanted to get back to the activities that I enjoyed. And I learned how to drive again. I had been told that I needed to pass the PAIR test, which for the RCMP is the entrance physical test, which is based on a chase, like a foot chase with a bad guy, and then a struggle. And so I'd been told that in order to go back to work, I needed to pass the PAIR test. My first attempt at the PAIR test was a total disaster. I had a big fail and had a meltdown in the gym, and I swore I would never go back. However, about a month later, I did go back and my second attempt, and I crushed it. And on October 4th, 1999, only 10 months after I lost my leg, I made an unprecedented return to active duties as a member with a prosthetic leg. And while it was unprecedented, and I thought that I was definitely regaining my life and resuming all the things that I wanted to get back to, it turns out it wasn't the end of facing adversity. In 2003, I was officially diagnosed with post-traumatic stress disorder, and no one was really talking about that then. I had flashbacks, nightmares, I was drinking too much, I was numbing myself, I was hypervigilant, I had insomnia, severe insomnia, I wasn't able to sleep well. But I reached out, and when I was at my darkest time, I reached out and I kept reaching out until I found someone that I was able to build a rapport with. And it's not easy putting yourself out there in those situations, and it's not necessarily your fault if you don't connect with somebody that you do reach out to. So I am a big proponent of reaching out for help, even when things are good, because I think that that's often when we can slip. Therapy, medication when needed, mindfulness, and community, those are all parts of my toolkit now. I quit asking, why me? I think that it's a futile question to ask because there are no answers and there's no rationale and there's no justifications. I thought that the worst was probably behind me, but my life still continued to throw more tests at me. I became duty to accommodate, and I was limited in my duties and the scope of what I was able to do and the hours that I was able to work. I found that my living with a disability and having started a new family, I was giving all my good energy to work. And as an amputee, I expend about 40% more energy than a normal person, able-bodied person, and it was really taxing on me as well. I felt when I had to become duty to accommodate, it was devastating because I had beat the odds and I had overcome so much. But I felt like also that despite the fact that I was required to work part-time, I was feeling depressed, I was feeling betrayed, but I also quickly learned that if I advocated for myself and it reached out, networked, and used my voice, then I could establish connections that were going to be very, very helpful because I was in a unique situation. I didn't know anybody else who was facing what I was facing when it came to restrictions on work duties. I'd had to listen to my body. That was not an option. I had to listen to my body, and I knew that if I didn't, then I was going to fail, and it was going to be dangerous for me to be working and being out on the streets. And so it was forced on me, but I also knew in my heart of hearts that it was the right thing for me at that time. I trusted my instincts. I paced myself, and I said no when I needed to. I learned how to rest and reset. And I was able to continue my career and do almost 24 years of service, of which I'm really, really proud. Retirement in 2020 brought some new challenges and another layer of a loss of identity and belonging, and I think many of us can relate to that. We often identify ourselves by what we do for a living, and no longer having that seemed like a shift in my mindset. In 2024, I was honored to be selected as a security liaison officer with the Canadian Paralympic Committee. And just weeks later, I was diagnosed with invasive melanoma. I ended up having to have surgery on my good leg. And even before I got those results, I took a devastating fall where I broke my right femur, which is my amputated side. It was a badly broken femur, and it required a rod and 4 screws. My dependence was entirely gone yet again. I was in a wheelchair once I was released from the hospital, and my chronic pain intensified. My mobility was extremely limited. I live alone, so it was extremely challenging to function and take care of myself and my dog. But you know what? My community showed up. My community stepped up, and I haven't lived in my new community for very long. I haven't even been here 2 years. So I was absolutely humbled by the response that I got from my neighbors, my new friends. And I had to do something that I've never been good at, which is accepting that help. Healing doesn't happen in isolation, I learned, and it was important for me to make sure that I learned to accept it and be grateful. And it wasn't a sign of weakness. It wasn't a sign of being less than. I also found that speaking helped me to find purpose again. I began speaking in 2000, and I was raw from my injury and returning to work, and I was terrified to speak. I didn't know what people would want to hear from me, but I also quickly learned after my very first presentation that my story could help others. It made me feel valued, and it made me feel like I was continuing to be productive despite the fact that my life had shifted so dramatically. Back when I was in rehab, I didn't see people like me on rehab posters. I wasn't an elite athlete climbing mountains or skydiving, and I wasn't a model walking the runways. And those were the images that were on the walls of my prosthetic clinic. And as I would sit there waiting for my legs to be built, I would look at those images and think, oh, like, why is there not somebody more relatable? And so what I did was I became a poster. And that poster that features my return to duty is still hanging in the rehab facility 26 years later. In 2021, I published my memoir, and it's called 1033, An Officer Down Steps Back Up. Because writing helped me reclaim my story. It helped me look back at my experiences through a different lens. And it helped me understand my identity and what work was to me and what my career was to me. And it helped me package it up and put it into a different category and release that sense of belonging that I had. And while I'm proud of it, it was just a chapter in my life. I've learned that pain doesn't need to be wasted. We can turn it into purpose. But I've also learned to be patient with myself, to take meds when I need them, to research my options and keep learning. I've learned to build routines that support me, whether it's nutrition, movement, therapy, rest. And I have to do what works for me, not necessarily works for everybody else. I also found that healing and resilience aren't one size fits all. Resilience is not about never falling. It's not about always staying strong. It's about falling and getting back up. It's about showing up again with shaky knees and a brave face, a willingness to try and to say yes, to take risks. So I'll leave you with this. Your mindset is indeed your greatest tool. Turn inward first. Turn inward and listen to your gut. Trust your body. Set micro goals to set you up for success. Create healthy routines and protect them. Ask for help. It's not a sign of weakness. Use the services and supports available to you. Advocate for yourself. No one else knows your needs like you do. Speak kindly to yourself. It's a very difficult thing for many of us to do, but change your narrative and bet on yourself every single time. You matter. Even if no one says it today, even if you're struggling right now, your impact might not show up until years later when someone reaches out to you like they did to me and said, you changed my life. You're my hero. You rescued me. You inspired me. So please stay in the fight. Start small, rise again, be creative, be of service, and cultivate connections in ways that matter to you. And when you're ready, share your story, because I assure you, someone out there needs to hear it.
Well, Laurie, thank you so much for sharing your incredible story of resilience with us today. So I had the pleasure of meeting you last week in Toronto. And what struck me the most is the energy you radiate. It's phenomenal. And, you know, I learned a little bit more about you, and I learned about, one of your recent experiences, and I was shocked. You know, I can only imagine how much it sucks, to lose a lower leg. That's probably not the right word. It's much worse than that. But then to sustain yet another shattering injury to that leg would be so devastating. So for viewers, this session today is pre-recorded because Laurie cannot be with us on the 18th of June. Laurie, you'll be undergoing yet another surgery to remove hardware in your leg and continue your journey of healing. Rest assured, we'll all be with you that day and we'll be cheering for you.
Thank
Uh,
you. I need all the help I can get.
So the message you shared with us during your presentation, they were very clear. They were reassuring. They were inspiring. They can be a beacon of light for those who struggle with chronic pain, and the other side of that coin, mental health challenge. So today I want, in this Q&A, explore your views on resilience, and defining resilience as that ability to bounce back, or that ability to withstand and recover from challenges. So in the military, we've got a program called the Road to Mental Readiness, RM2R, and it equips you as a young recruit with the tools to deal with resilience. So my question is kind of in two parts for you, depending on what happened. At the depot, were you taught anything about resilience? Did you have a course? Did they give you tools? And then were you able to, one, remember those tools and then use them, and were they effective? And if not, then how did you develop that resilience, that incredible ability that you have to surmount those challenges? Was it iterative for you? Or was there kind of a moment that happened? Are there mistakes or things you did that did not work so well? And are there, basically, I'm asking, yes, are there lessons learned you want to share with us today?
Yeah, so I think that's a really interesting question. And I think I'm going to age myself by saying this, but when I went through Depot in 95, 96, there was nothing with regards to resilience, mental health. I think some of the strategies were more sort of captured under maybe the fitness umbrella, the physical training. So maybe a bit of yoga. I was chatting with my girlfriend who was in Depot with me the other day, and I asked her this very question because I said, we're wondering how things have changed over the years. And I don't recall anything at all back then because post traumatic stress was not really something that was being talked about. Now, I know the RCMP has definitely improved and has gotten some more programs in place, but I can't really speak to those. So I think that for me, when people start using the word resilience, I wouldn't say that I would use the word to attribute to anything that I'm doing when I'm in the moment. I think it's something that only comes after the experience with reflection and wisdom. So I don't know that that's a word that right now I'm going through this other issue, and it's been a really tough year on a couple of levels. I've had some melanoma, and I broke my femur very badly and had to have a surgery and have this other one coming up. So when you talk about resilience, I mean, I'm not really waving my hand right now and saying, geez, I'm such a resilient person. I have developed a lot of strategies, but I hope that in a year from now, I'll be able to look back and say, you know what, I was able to really employ those strategies and use the things that I've learned over time. And yes, now I can say that I handled that with some resilience and some grace. So I think there were a lot of lessons that I did learn, especially with my first major injury back in 1998, that tend to work for me. And so when I wrote my book a few years ago, I really dove into those, like what did work for me. And what I found now with this past year is that a few of them don't really serve me anymore. And I found that very interesting because some of the stuff that I thought worked for me and did work for me previously don't always. So I think we need to adjust and we need to modify and change with maybe age, with life circumstances, whatever the case may be. But don't just get your toolkit and say, okay, this is my toolkit forever. I mean, you might want to update it. You might want to change a few of the things. You might want to learn new strategies that I just didn't know of before. So I think that's probably the biggest takeaway for me under the current circumstances.
Thank you so much for those insights. And that's key. That tool set is ever expanding. Things changes. You meet new people. You deal with different people. You learn different things. You share. So thank you for that. As I said in the beginning of the session, you left us with many messages at the end. Of your presentation. You kind of go through all of them and reinforce them. One that struck a chord particularly with me was your comment about finding support that works for you. And if you can't find effective help, keep looking. It's out there. So a lot of questions on this. So how did you do this? Who did you reach out to? Is there an organization, a tool, a peer support group, something that was particularly helpful to you? What worked? What did not work? And one that's tricky, because I had to do that once, is how do you tell your health practitioner, sorry, you're great, but that's not working for me. And the downside of that is also it's an uncomfortable discussion on a personal level, but also down deep, it brings self-doubt about your own ability to recover. So am I the problem? So a lot of
Absolutely.
questions in once, but over to you.
Yes, you're absolutely right. So I would say that when I was first shot, I was in the hospital and a psychiatrist, I believe he's a psychiatrist, he might have been a psychologist, I'm not sure, but the RCMP had arranged for someone to come into the hospital and speak to me, but I was very heavily medicated. So I don't really remember that very well. I remember a card being there and, hey, you know, she seems to be doing as well as she could be for now. And I don't know that I ever reached out to that particular person, but a few months-ish, several weeks later, I became very, very, very depressed, and I was definitely suicidal. I was I remember actively thinking, you know, lying in my bed and wondering about certain strategies to end my life, and I knew that I needed help. And I was grateful that I had that awareness, because one of the messages that I think people use too easily is like, just reach out, just reach out. Well, when you're in the depths of despair, it's simply impossible sometimes. And so to add that inability to reach out adds kind of another layer of shame to an already terrible situation that you're facing. And it's just yet another way of kind of digging a hole and pulling the dirt in on top of you. And I use that phrase because I can relate to what it's like to be so desperate for the pain to end. And so when I got to that stage in that first few months in 1999, when I was released from the hospital, I had heard about this reputable therapist. Thought, okay, this is the person, very well versed in first responders. I'm going to reach out to this person. And I went several times in the depths of despair, and it actually made it worse. And that just made my feelings about my self-worth, because it's like, oh, if this person is so highly regarded, like, I must be the problem. Clearly, I'm unhelpable. No one can help me. If she can't help me, if this person can't help me, then where do I go from here? But I was grateful that I was able to find other support systems. And in that time, I didn't realize the value of one of the support groups that was established in my rehab facility. So in my rehab facility, our social worker and our physiotherapist got together and brought together a couple of different amputees. And we all had much different circumstances, very, very different backgrounds. We all ended up being amputees, but for different reasons. And I remember thinking, this is not really going to be valuable. They are facing much different challenges. But I went, and it actually ended up becoming the most valuable form of connection that I probably could have had in that phase. Yes, we did have different journeys, but we had a lot of similarities because it's the emotions that bond us. It's not necessarily the day-to-day surgeries and the things that you're facing. It's not the circumstance. It's all those emotions that we're facing. We were all going through those. So I really learned early on the value of that connection and that support group model. So back then, that was a very small group. But now we've got the Badge of Life Canada, you've got Wounded Warriors, you've got Cops for Cancer, you've got all these sort of team building initiatives that you can be a part of to be able to find that connection. When it comes to counseling, I would say that yes, I never had the courage to really tell that particular counselor why I stopped going, but I did give it a fair try, in my opinion. Having said that, I did reach out to different counselors over the course of my career. And I mean, one of the downsides about the kinds of worlds that we live in is we move around. So we don't have access to the same consistency in care. And that can be challenging. So it's kind of like, oh, overwhelming to have to start again and try to build a rapport with somebody new and start from the back end and say, oh, in 1998, I got shot and this is where I'm at. But I do find that sticking my neck out, trying to get the care that I needed, and not finding at certain times care that was effective, it was important to just move on. A couple of times I did tell the caregiver or the counselor why. One example was I went several times to one, and the counselor was calling me the wrong name by about session 6. And I thought, if the person is still calling me the wrong name, I don't feel heard. I don't feel valued. I don't know that my story is being actually heard. And it really, I felt devalued. And so I said to the person, this is why I'm going to stop coming to you. But I did have the inner drive to go and find somebody new. And I have kept that. And I've always maintained as well that it's important to find somebody who works for you, because just because it works for somebody else doesn't necessarily mean it's going to work for you.
I mean, that's heartbreaking to hear that a therapist would remember your name or get it wrong. That's heartbreaking. I'm sorry that we're out of time already. 10 minutes flew by. Yeah, absolutely. Now, the good news is if our viewers have got more questions, that they want to ask you, they can do that. They can actually reach out to CPCOE and we'll provide you with those questions to really allow everybody to grow out of your experience. So, Laurie, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts, your insights, and your experiences with us. We wish you the very best next week. As I said, we'll be thinking of you, and we'll now transition to our next speakers. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, Laurie's presentation really set the scene very well for our next speaker, Dr. Alfreda Malados. Dr. Malados is an assistant clinical professor at the McMaster University Department of Neuro and Behavioral Sciences, with a cross appointment as an assistant clinical professor adjunct to the Department of Anesthesiology at McMaster. He has held numerous past leadership roles locally and regionally, including an interim role as former chief of psychiatry and medical director of the Department of Psychiatry at Joseph Brant Hospital. He was instrumental in co-developing the concurrent disorder programs at Joseph Brant Hospital, where he served as a lead physician for 8 years. In 2012, he co-founded the Advanced Mind Clinic, a specialty psychiatric clinic in Burlington, Ontario, serving the local community and extending its quality consultations to the greater region. He was involved in the clinic until 2021. Amidst the COVID-19 pandemic in 2021, he co-founded the Mind Revive Clinic, a specialty psychiatric clinic, and actively oversees it as the chief medical director. He has several publications in numerous health areas and is extensively involved in teaching. He educates students, resident, clinical fellows, family doctors, and other clinicians in a broad array of teaching settings and educational platforms. He's a speaker for many educational events and conferences on topics related to mental health and pharmacology. He also has a personal interest in human behavior, particularly in areas related to motivation. So it's my great pleasure to give the floor to Dr. Malados.
Good day, everyone. It gives me great pleasure to talk to you today on what I see as a very real and profound topic that not just would affect the lives of people that we serve and care for, but maybe in our own lives as well. My name is Alfreda Malados. I'm a clinical psychiatrist, and I'd like to talk to you today on resilience in the face of trauma. The wound. The wound is the place where the light enters you. I want to begin with a story that embodies the essence of resilience. Meet Edith Langford, a woman who at the age of 9 was accidentally shot by her cousin. The physical pain surely was immense, but the emotional and psychological scars were profound. Yet Edith chose not to be defined by her trauma. With unwavering determination and the support of her mother, she only regained her ability to walk, but also transformed her pain into purpose. Today, she's a compassionate therapist, helping others navigate their own journeys of healing. Edith's story is a testament to the human capacity for resilience and the power of choosing one's path forward. And as Rumi eloquently said, the wound is the place where light enters you. Trauma, while deeply painful, can also be a catalyst for growth. Growth, not just in terms of understanding, but also through transformation. It is through our own darkest moments that we often find and discover our own inner strength and capacity for healing. Trauma isn't just an event. It is a profound disruption to our sense of safety, self, and identity. It can stem from various sources, including accidents, abuse, or actually natural disasters. Resilience, on the other hand, is our capacity to recover from such disruptions. It's about bouncing back, yes, and in some cases, bouncing forward, emerging stronger and more resourceful. Resilience, put in another way, is the ability to adapt positively in the face of adversity. And let me be clear, it's not about avoiding stress, but learning to navigate it effectively. The American Psychological Association defines resilience as the process of adapting well in the face of adversity, trauma, tragedy, threats, or a significant source of stress. It is a dynamic process that involves behaviors, thoughts, emotions, actions that can be learned and developed in everyone. Trauma, yes, can be significant because it impairs our brain's functioning. We know of this through replicated science and neuroliterature that the amygdala is responsible for processing emotions and fear. But in trauma, it becomes hyperactive, abnormal, while the hippocampus, which is crucial for memory and learning, may shrink. And this imbalance often leads to a heightened stress response and challenges in processing memories. However, we shouldn't forget that the brain's neuroplasticity offers hope. Through targeted interventions, yes, we can rewire these pathways and promote healing. Resilience is cultivated through strong relationships, a sense of purpose, and a adaptive coping and through adaptive coping strategies. We know that early secure attachments may provide a foundation, but while skills like mindfulness and cognitive reframing offer us a way to enhance our capacity to navigate this adversity effectively. Research indicates that these factors play a significant role in building resilience, highlighting the importance of supportive environments for personal growth. While trauma can be devastating, it can also be a catalyst for growth. Many individuals report a newfound appreciation in life, deeper relationships, and a stronger sense of purpose. This phenomenon is known as post-traumatic growth, and it underscores the human capacity for this transformation. This has been studied, and studies have highlighted that individuals who experience trauma can develop greater appreciation for life and deeper relationships. However, we should be careful to look at what is healthy ways and unhealthy ways to cope. Coping mechanisms, yes, provide a pivotal role in resilience. Healthy strategies such as physical activity, seeking support, bolster our ability to recover. In contrast, maladaptive behaviors like substance use can impede healing and in fact exacerbate and perpetuate this very vicious circle of trauma and lack of wellness. Research again has underscored this importance that adaptive coping strategies are associated with better mental health outcomes, emphasizing the importance of healthy coping mechanisms. Therapeutic interventions like CBT, otherwise known as cognitive behavioral therapy, and MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reductions, have demonstrated effectiveness in treating trauma-related disorders. We see some very strong research coming from systematic reviews, meta-analysis, and one cited in Science Direct in 2004 that CBT significantly enhanced the resilience among adults with benefits even sustained post-intervention. Similarly, another study in 2024 reported that MBSR improved psychological resilience, post-traumatic growth, and life satisfaction among individuals who were struggling with trauma. This shows that therapies help individuals reframe, change, reshape negative thought patterns into more positive ones, and allow a person to be more present, to be able to shift and improve their quality of life. Human connection is the cornerstone of resilience. Social supports not only provide this emotional comfort, but also enhance physiological responses to stress. Engaging in supported communities that foster a sense of belonging accelerates this type of recovery. A study highlighted in The Guardian in 2004 emphasized this importance of community-led recovery efforts, particularly among women subjected to violence during the New South Wales floods. These findings show that these changes play a critical role of social supports in the trauma recovery pathway for individuals. Personal resilience must be practiced. Building resilience is an ongoing process. It's like anything, like training a muscle, developing a new skill in a sport. Practices like journaling, meditation, regular physical activity strengthen and bolster our psychological and physiological resilience. A pilot study published in PMC in 2021 found that participants who engaged in MBSR, mindfulness-based stress reduction, experienced significant reductions in PTSD symptoms, depression, grief, along with improved sleep and life satisfaction. These habits empower us to face challenges with greater fortitude. Resilience is collective. It requires being an active participant within our milieu that supports health and well-being. Communities play a vital role in fostering resilience. Collective efforts such as shared rituals and communal support systems do in fact create this environment where individuals can heal together, amplifying that collective strength I was talking about earlier on. An article published in The Guardian in 2004 discussed how community-led initiatives like Left Right Hook program in Melbourne combines storytelling and, interestingly, boxing to empower trauma survivors. This highlights the transformative power of collective resilience. There is, however, great promise, new frontiers in resilience research. Advancements in neuroscience and psychology continue to illuminate this pathways towards resilience. VRET, otherwise virtual reality exposure, and genetic research offer promise around avenues around enhancing our capacity, not just to understand, but our capacity to withstand and recover from trauma. Meta-analysis published in 2019 found that VRET significantly reduced PTSD symptoms and had these sustained effects even at 3 and 6 month follow-ups. These findings support the application of immersive therapies in treating trauma effectively. In closing, resilience is not a fixed trait, but a dynamic process that we cultivate by embracing our adversity, seeking support, and engaging in practices that promote well-being. Research underscores that resilience can be developed and strengthened over time. We've heard about this VRET, virtual reality exposure, as a very interesting therapy combined with brain stimulation, offers some hope for people who struggle with trauma. Healing doesn't mean the damage never existed. It means the damage no longer controls our lives. Sometimes these darkest times may make way for the brightest lights. The wound is the place where the light enters you. So as we conclude, let us reflect on Rumi's words. Each of us carries our own wounds, but within them lies the potential for light, hope, and growth and transformation. By embracing our experiences and learning from them, I do believe we can emerge stronger and more compassionate. But let us remember, resilience is not about avoiding pain, but about finding meaning and strength through it. Thank you.
Well, Dr. Amaldas, thank you very much for your inspiring presentation, which certainly offers that there is light that can illuminate the very dark tunnel that can be trauma. So we have quite a few questions from reviewers, and we'll try to get through as many as we can in the next 10 minutes or so. So the first question wants to explore a little bit more the post-traumatic growth. And the question is, what personality factors impact whether a person can have post-traumatic growth? Curiosity, insight, self-compassion are example that the reviewer is citing.
Well, first of all, thank you all for having me and inviting me to the session. I think it's a very relevant topic and a topic that I think we all can identify in some capacity. But just to, get to the question, the question is about personality traits and post-traumatic growth. I mean, certainly not everyone exposed to trauma develops develops psychopathology or illness-based symptoms from the trauma, and some experience, in fact, this post-traumatic growth. So it speaks to that there must be certainly underlying factors that influence why some people may have certain aspects. I'd like to speak more to the piece, one of many pieces that may determine this post-traumatic growth, and that's this aspect of traits. There is like a well body of research that has been studying this, and I just like to highlight maybe a few just to bring to the table the key aspects that can bring forth this post-traumatic growth benefit. I think one of them is social connectiveness. And while we may not think of this very much in the sense of a personality trait, it's this perceived aspect of social support that consistently is one of the greatest predictors of post-traumatic growth, or PTG. The other one is cognitive flexibility. And in simple terms, this is the ability to, the adaptive ability to reinterpret adversity. We see this in some of the people who struggle with this, or those with high neuroticism or high perfectionism. They tend to struggle a little bit more with post-trauma in terms of this rigid thinking style. But again, these are things that can be learned and improved upon. The other aspect is self-compassion. And we have a lot of emerging research coming off that highlights that self-compassion is, in fact, a buffer against this shame and self-blame that fosters resilience. And I found this trait quite as well very meaningful. And again, this reinforces some of the literature we have even within psychotherapy, that openness, curiosity, openness to experience often leads to cognitive restructuring. So individuals who have high openness to want to explore trauma narratives more deeply allow themselves the opportunity towards this particular change. Certainly, there is no singular factor that is high in terms of determination, and it's certainly a collective aspect that must be assessed and certainly identified, and then helping people change. So it speaks to the fact that psychiatric interventions can nurture this post-traumatic growth through therapeutic techniques. And again, factoring some of these trait qualities, things like narrative exposure therapy, mindfulness, compassion-focused therapy, all can help people towards improving outcomes.
Thank you very much. And I think a key part of your message is, you're not born with or without it. So growth is possible into those factors. Let's switch to our second question. Are there studies showing the differences between mainstream male resiliency and that of females?
I mean, certainly, JM, this is a very one of many important, I would say, factors, right, towards post-traumatic growth. But I think the key here is to recognize that males and females exhibit different trajectories, both in terms of this resilience, coping strategy, as well as neurobiological responses to trauma. And we must factor in, it's a very complex area, and it's often shaped by many factors, things like biology and social cultural expectations. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It just shows that there are these natural differences in how different genders, express, their experiences towards stress and anxiety. But on average, there are certainly sort of things to speak of in terms of gender differences. And of course, we must also factor in individual experiences. To be more precise about some of these qualities, there's a well-bodied literature talking about biological responses. And of course, we know that females tend to have more of this heightened limbic activation, and males exhibit more like stronger prefrontal modulation. And what that suggests is, females are more sensitive towards affective dysregulation, but are at the same time also more responsive to relational support. To say it simply, women may feel trauma more deeply, but also heal better with support from others. Men, on the other hand, manage emotions by staying calm under stress, but often tend to analyze or suppress their emotional reaction. And I'll speak a little bit to how that can be advantageous and also can be a challenge. But again, this is highlighting that genders present in very different ways. When we think of more sort of social cultural norms, males are often conditioned to suppress emotional expression. And this is what I was speaking to about earlier on, or alluding, that it potentially delays help-seeking behavior. Females tend to use more emotional focused coping, and they're more likely to seek social supports. And this, again, fosters their recovery well. In terms of more outcome studies, we see that resilience research shows that while men may score higher in terms of task-focused coping in terms of their stresses, women often demonstrate more greater emotional flexibility and post-traumatic growth, especially when they are in protective relationships that are there. So the point of all of this is not just speaking about the various gender differences, but to really point out that gender-tailored interventions should be considered when we're helping clients as part of their recovery model.
Well, thank you. I mean, that was a great question, and your answer, especially your concluding remarks in your answer, are critical for practitioners and clinicians to certainly understand. Let's switch to a third question. If trauma from different sources from birth onward occur, how do cortisol levels adjust?
That's a very important question. And again, there's many studies, JM, to talk about some of this, but I'll try to be as brevit as I can. Well, we do know that there is this robust evidence of a psychological trauma, particularly in early life, and also in terms of repeated trauma, that increases this risk towards pain syndromes and even amplifying severity. If I can draw the correlation towards trauma and pain for a moment and extend this as well, even to some pain conditions, there's some few things to talk about here in terms of some of the literature. One particular one is this very famous ACE study. And when we look at this study, we see this was published, I think, back in the 90s, but it shows that there's a dose-dependent relationship between early trauma and increased incidence of chronic pain, and sort of speaking towards that those stress model changes. And this can even make people susceptible to many sorts of conditions, fibromyalgia, migraines, and musculoskeletal disorders. There's also an interesting biological overlap when we think between trauma and chronic pain. And this again talks very much about the integral aspects within the neuronal circuitry. We see this particularly with the amygdala, the anterior cingulate cortex, and prefrontal cortex. Basically, these are areas that are very important in terms of emotional regulation and regulation of thought and behavior. We also see this stress axis that you were speaking of is quite dysregulated within these two conditions, as well as within the sympathetic nervous system. So there is a very well understood and replicated finding that trauma, in terms of early childhood, and even in terms of other incidences, can in fact change the person's biology. Interestingly, when we think of trauma and pain from a PTSD lens and pain comorbidity, we see again, well-established literature with veterans and even within the civilian population that there is a co-occurrence between mental health, PTSD, and chronic pain, which is well documented, and that trauma acts as both a precipitating reason as well as a perpetuating reason towards illness states. The take home is that trauma-informed care should be standard in terms of chronic pain assessments. And certainly I would even extend a request to it, saying that screening for trauma history is essential, not just within the mental health setting, but also in pain clinics as well as in other primary care facilities as well.
Thank you very much. And the next question actually, complement the initial one very well. Is there much difference between one instance of trauma versus many varied events over a longer time period?
think, JM, trauma is a very individual experience. And I think, defining that one trauma is more than the other does great injustice to people. I think each person's experience is governed by very multi-pronged factors: the type of trauma, the frequency of the trauma, the severity of the trauma, the chronicity of the trauma, and more importantly, within what type of support systems the person had access to, and so forth. It's certainly a very how do you say, a complex piece, but certainly I think recognizing that we have today trauma is a very recognized and important area, not just for academic study, but also in terms of helping identify the factors that allow patients to embark on in terms of their improvements. Certainly highlights that we've come a long way in terms of trauma understanding, that we do have, in fact, good interventions, be it in medications, in terms of therapy. And so it does offer patients the hope that regardless of what their trauma experience has been, there are things that people can do to pursue, to seek, to improve ultimately a better quality of life. That hope in all of these things is not just a vague concept. It's a neurobiological and psychological reality we can help foster every day. And as healthcare providers, certainly that should be offered and given to patients the very best.
Well, thank you so much for your answer. Unfortunately, that 10 minutes of Q&A went by very quickly, and our time's almost up. So I would like to thank you and thank Lori for your very insightful presentations today. There are so many key takeaways and messages in your presentation, and the two presentations really complemented each other so well. And I'll try to kind of summarize some of those key messages. Trauma does not have to define you. Growth is possible. Turn your pain into purpose. Resilience is not a trait. You're not born with it or without it. It's like a muscle. It takes training, train often, adopt a lifestyle that incorporates the healthy habits that foster resilience, and always work at it. Use your experience to help others. Help is out there. If it's not working for you, keep looking and you will find it. Speak kindly to yourself. And of course, the social element of resiliency that was discussed. So light up that network when things are not working well. It will help. So thank you very much to our speakers today for your presentation, for answering those questions. The Chronic Pain Center of Excellence for Canadian Veterans aims to bring hope to all veterans and their family living with chronic pain. I remind you that a recording of this and all of our session is available on the website, and any questions that you may have can also be asked through our site at the email address that's listed. Don't hesitate to reach out and contact us for any information that you require. We'd also be very happy to get your feedback on those sessions. Do you find them useful from a veteran's perspective, from a clinician's perspective? So if you have any comments or any topics that you'd like to hear about, please let us know. So this concludes our Spring 2025 webinar series. We hope that you'll be with us next fall for more education. Please subscribe to our mailing list to keep you up to date. And on behalf of the Chronic Pain Center of Excellence for Canadian Veterans, thank you.